In 1885, the largest private land theft in human history was approved by every major nation in Europe and disguised as a humanitarian mission. The man who received it was Leopold II, King of the Belgians. The territory was the Congo, 2.6 million square kilometers of Central Africa, 76 times the size of Belgium itself. Leopold told the world he was bringing civilization, ending slavery, opening free trade. Every word of it was a lie. What Leopold built was a private corporation disguised as a country. He called it the Congo Free State. It was neither free nor a state. It was the personal property of one man, run from a palace in Brussels by a king who never once set foot on Congolese soil. He controlled all land. He monopolized all trade. He took 50% of every profit made by every company operating in his territory. He extracted a fortune in ivory and rubber, and he did it through forced labor on a scale the modern world had never seen. When the world finally began asking questions, he burned the entire archive. Every financial record, every trade ledger, every contract, every concession agreement fed into a furnace on his orders. He told his aides, "They have no right to know what I did there." Belgium has never removed his statues. This is that documented story. Drop where you are watching from in the comments right now. And stay to the end, because what Leopold did with the profits is the part nobody teaches. Leopold wanted a colony. Belgium did not. The Belgian government believed that colonies were an extravagance for a small country with no navy and no merchant marine. They refused every proposal Leopold made for overseas expansion. The parliament would not fund it. The public would not support it. And the constitution gave the king no authority to act without parliamentary approval. So Leopold went around his own country entirely. In 1876, he organized the Brussels Geographical Conference, inviting explorers, geographers, and philanthropists from across Europe. He announced the creation of the International African Association, an organization whose stated purpose was to bring civilization to Central Africa and suppress the Arab slave trade. The name sounded noble. The mission sounded humanitarian. And Leopold was elected its chairman. It was a front. The association existed to give Leopold a respectable cover for what he was actually doing, claiming territory. He hired Henry Morton Stanley, the most famous explorer in the world, the man who had found David Livingstone, and sent him to the Congo River Basin. Stanley's public mission was exploration and humanitarian outreach. His real mission was to sign treaties with local chiefs, treaties that the chiefs could not read, written in languages they did not speak, transferring sovereignty over their land to Leopold's association. Between 1879 and 1884, Stanley signed over 450 treaties with African leaders. The treaties gave Leopold's organization exclusive trading rights, land ownership, and political authority over a territory larger than Western Europe. The chiefs who signed them believed they were agreeing to friendship and trade. They were signing away their countries. Leopold then created a second organization, the International Association of the Congo, to hold the treaties and administer the territory. This was not a government. It was not a colonial administration. It was a private holding company, controlled entirely by Leopold and funded with his personal money. In 1884, the German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck convened the Berlin Conference. 14 European nations gathered to divide Africa among themselves. No African was invited. No African voice was heard. No African representative sat at the table where the future of an entire continent was decided. The conference lasted from November 1884 to February 1885. Leopold's representatives arrived with a carefully prepared case. They presented the International Association of the Congo as a philanthropic enterprise dedicated to free trade, civilization, and the suppression of slavery. They promised that the Congo would be a free trade zone, open to merchants of all nations. They promised humanitarian governance. They promised to protect the Congolese people. They distributed maps showing the territory Leopold claimed, and they presented the 450 treaties signed by Stanley as proof of legitimate authority. Every European power had its own reason for agreeing, and Leopold exploited every rivalry. He positioned himself as the harmless alternative, a philanthropic king from a small neutral country who posed no threat to anyone. The other powers agreed because giving the Congo to Leopold was easier than fighting over it themselves. The United States, under President Chester Arthur, was the first nation to recognize Leopold's claim. This was not accidental. Leopold had hired Henry Shelton Sanford, a former U.S. minister to Belgium, to lobby Washington directly. Sanford presented Leopold's mission to Congress as a humanitarian enterprise that would open African trade to American merchants. Congress accepted the argument without investigation. Every European power followed the American recognition within months. On February 26, 1885, the Berlin Conference granted Leopold personal sovereignty over the Congo Free State. Not Belgium. Not the Belgian government, not a colonial administration. Leopold, personally, as private property. He was the only individual in history to be granted personal ownership of an African territory by international agreement. The world's only private colony, owned by a single man who had never been there and would never go. But owning a territory of 2.6 million square kilometers was meaningless without revenue. Leopold needed the Congo to pay for itself, and then to pay for him. The mechanism he designed to extract that wealth would become the most profitable and the most brutal private enterprise in the history of colonialism. The Congo Free State was structured like a business, because that is exactly what it was. Leopold issued a series of decrees from Brussels that turned the entire territory into a profit extraction system. The first decree nationalized all so-called vacant land, which meant every piece of land that was not physically occupied by a Congolese village at the moment of the decree. In practice, this meant almost everything. Forests, rivers, rubber plantations, ivory grounds, all of it became the personal property of Leopold or his concession companies. The Congolese people who had lived on and used this land for generations were informed that it now belonged to a king in Europe they had never heard of. They were prohibited from trading freely. They were prohibited from selling their own rubber or ivory to anyone other than Leopold's agents. The penalty for trading with an unauthorized buyer was imprisonment or worse. Leopold divided the territory into 3 zones. The first was his personal domain, the domaine privé, consisting of the most resource-rich areas. Every franc of revenue from this zone went directly to Leopold's personal accounts in Brussels. No Belgian government official had access to these accounts. No parliamentary oversight existed. The money was his. The second zone consisted of concession territories, vast areas granted to private companies in which those companies had exclusive rights to extract resources. The most notorious of these was the Anglo-Belgian India Rubber Company, known as ABIR. It was funded primarily by British investors. Colonel John Thomas North, a British speculator who had made his fortune in Chilean nitrates, provided £40,000 of the initial capital. Leopold received 50% of all profits from every concession company operating in his territory. The third zone was nominally open to free trade, a small fraction of the total territory maintained to give the appearance of compliance with the Berlin Conference promises. In reality, it was insignificant. The system was designed so that Leopold profited from every transaction at every level. If his personal domain produced rubber, the revenue was his. If a concession company produced rubber, 50% of the profit was his. If an independent trader somehow operated in the free trade zone, Leopold's agents taxed the transaction. There was no outcome in which Leopold did not collect. The problem was labor. Rubber does not harvest itself. Wild rubber in the Congolese forest grew on vines that had to be cut, tapped, and processed by hand. The work was grueling and dangerous. And the Congolese people had no reason to do it. They gained nothing from the system. Every franc they produced went to Leopold or his concession companies. Leopold's solution was force. His private army, the Force Publique, consisted of African soldiers commanded by European officers. They were sent into villages with rubber quotas. Each village was assigned a quantity of rubber it was required to deliver every 2 weeks. If the quota was met, the village was left alone until the next collection. If the quota was not met, the consequences were severe. The Force Publique enforced the quotas through violence and hostage-taking. Women and children were held until the men delivered the required rubber. Villages that resisted were burned. The system was not an excess committed by rogue officers. It was the policy. It was designed in Brussels. It was enforced from the top. The rubber quotas turned the entire Congolese population into an unpaid workforce for Leopold's private corporation. The Congolese were not employees. They were not slaves in the legal sense, because Leopold had promised the Berlin Conference that slavery would be abolished. They were forced laborers, compelled to work by a private army funded by a private king for a private profit. Leopold had promised Europe he would end slavery in the Congo. What he built was something worse, a system in which an entire population worked for free so that one man could collect. The profits were extraordinary. But nobody outside Leopold's inner circle knew exactly how much money was flowing out of the Congo, because Leopold had designed the financial architecture specifically to ensure that no one could follow the money. The trail was hidden in shell companies, private accounts, and a web of financial instruments that would take investigators decades to unravel. Leopold kept 2 sets of books. One for the public, showing the Congo Free State as a struggling humanitarian enterprise that required constant financial support, and one for himself, showing the real revenues from ivory, rubber, and concession fees. The public accounts were designed to attract sympathy and investment. Leopold borrowed money from the Belgian government on the basis that the Congo was a charitable endeavor running at a loss. He issued bonds on European markets to fund infrastructure, railways, steamships, telegraph lines that were presented as humanitarian investments, but existed solely to move rubber and ivory to the coast more efficiently. The private accounts told a different story. Between 1890 and 1900, the decade of the rubber boom, the Congo generated enormous profits. The price of rubber on world markets had quadrupled as demand for bicycle and automobile tires exploded. Leopold's territory contained some of the largest wild rubber reserves on Earth, and his system of forced labor meant the production cost was effectively zero. The exact figures are impossible to determine, because Leopold burned the records, but historians have reconstructed partial accounts from surviving documents. Adam Hochschild, in his book King Leopold's Ghost, estimates that Leopold extracted the equivalent of over $1.1 billion in today's currency from the Congo during the period of his ownership. The rubber alone generated staggering returns. In 1890, the Congo exported 100 tons of rubber. By 1901, it was exporting 6,000 tons per year. The price on European markets reached 12 shillings per pound. The production cost, using forced labor, was virtually nothing. The profit margins were not 50% or even 80%. They approached 100%. Because the workforce was unpaid and the raw material was taken from land that Leopold had declared his personal property. Leopold also earned from ivory. In the early years of the Congo Free State, before the rubber boom, ivory was the primary source of revenue. Elephants were hunted across the territory and the tusks shipped to Antwerp where they were sold at auction. Leopold's agents confiscated ivory from Congolese traders and declared it state property, meaning Leopold's property. The ivory trade alone generated millions of francs before rubber overtook it in the 1890s. And there was a third revenue stream that is rarely discussed. Leopold sold concessions. European companies paid Leopold directly for the right to operate in designated zones of the Congo. These payments, separate from the 50% profit share, represented upfront capital flowing from European investors into Leopold's personal accounts. The concession system meant that Leopold was paid twice. Once when the company bought the right to operate, and again when the company earned its profits. Leopold did not keep the money in Belgian bank accounts where it could be traced. He laundered it through a network of private foundations, construction projects, and real estate investments. He built the Royal Palace at Laeken. He built the Royal Greenhouses, the largest private greenhouse complex in Europe. He constructed the Museum of Central Africa in Tervuren, a monument to his Congo enterprise filled with ivory and artifacts extracted from the territory. He built public parks, promenades, and monuments across Belgium. He purchased villas on the French Riviera. He funded construction projects in Ostend. Every building was funded with Congolese money. Every palace was built with rubber profits. Every public park was paid for by forced labor. And every project was presented to the Belgian public as evidence of Leopold's generosity, the builder king giving back to his people. The Belgian public saw the buildings. They did not see the books. They did not see the forced labor. They did not see the rubber quotas. They saw a generous monarch improving their country, and they never asked where the money came from. Leopold also used a financial instrument called the Fondation de la Couronne, the Crown Foundation. This was a private trust established in 1900 that held Congolese assets separately from both Leopold's personal estate and the Belgian state. The foundation owned land, buildings, and investments across Belgium and Europe, all funded by Congo revenues. It was structured so that the assets could not be seized by creditors, could not be taxed by the Belgian government, and could not be examined by Parliament. It was a shell company in everything but name, a 19th century offshore trust designed to hide the profits of a private colony from anyone who might come looking. But someone did come looking. A British diplomat in the Congo wrote a report that documented the entire system, the quotas, the forced labor, the violence, the profits. His report reached every government in Europe. And what Leopold did when a report was published reveals exactly how much he had to hide. In 1903, the British government appointed Roger Caseman, its consul in the Congo, to investigate conditions in the territory. Caseman traveled through the interior for 3 months. What he documented would become one of the most important human rights reports in modern history. Caseman interviewed Congolese villagers. He recorded their testimonies. He documented the quota system. He described the consequences of failure to meet quotas. He photographed the evidence. And he wrote a detailed report that was presented to the British Parliament in 1904. The Caseman report confirmed everything that a handful of journalists and missionaries had been saying for years. The Congo Free State was not a humanitarian enterprise. It was a forced labor camp operated for private profit. The civilizing mission was a lie. The free trade zone was a monopoly, and the philanthropic king was extracting a fortune while his private army terrorized the population. The report was sent to every government that had signed the Berlin Conference Agreement. It demanded action. At the same time, a former shipping clerk named Edmond Dene Morel was conducting his own investigation. Morel had worked for a Liverpool shipping line that carried cargo between Antwerp and the Congo. He noticed something that no one else had thought to question. The ships going to the Congo carried guns and ammunition. The ships coming back carried rubber and ivory. But no trade goods were going out, no cloth, no tools, no manufactured products, nothing that would indicate legitimate commerce. If rubber and ivory were coming back but no trade goods were going out, then the Congolese were not being paid for their labor. The entire system was extraction without compensation. Morel worked out the financial truth of the Congo Free State from shipping manifests, the most basic commercial documents imaginable. A shipping clerk in Liverpool had seen what diplomats and politicians had missed because he was the only person looking at the numbers instead of the speeches. Morel founded the Congo Reform Association in 1904, the first international human rights campaign in modern history. He published pamphlets, gave lectures, and lobbied governments across Europe and America. He built a coalition that included missionaries who had witnessed the system firsthand, journalists who had investigated Leopold's finances, and politicians who understood that the Berlin Conference promises had been violated. He recruited Mark Twain to write a satirical pamphlet called King Leopold's Soliloquy, in which Leopold defends himself against the mounting evidence. He recruited Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, to write The Crime of the Congo. He recruited Booker T. Washington to campaign against Leopold's system in the United States. The Congo Reform Association became the template for every international human rights organization that followed, from Amnesty International to Human Rights Watch. The pressure was overwhelming. Governments that had recognized Leopold's claim at Berlin were now being asked to explain why they had given a private individual the right to operate a forced labor system across an area the size of Western Europe. The United States, which had been the first to recognize Leopold's claim, was now being asked why it had endorsed a private colony that operated through violence and extraction. The pressure worked. By 1905, Leopold could no longer maintain the fiction. The Belgian parliament, pushed by socialist leader Emile van der Velde, forced Leopold to establish an independent commission of inquiry. The commission's findings confirmed the Casement report in every detail. Leopold was cornered. The evidence was public. The international pressure was overwhelming, and the financial architecture he had built was about to be examined by people who understood what they were looking at. So he destroyed the evidence. What Leopold did next was not the act of a man who had nothing to hide. It was the act of a man who understood exactly how much the records would reveal, and who decided that burning them was cheaper than being exposed. In 1908, as negotiations to transfer the Congo to Belgian government control were underway, Leopold ordered the destruction of the Congo Free State archives. The furnaces at Leopold's headquarters in Brussels burned for days. Financial ledgers documenting 23 years of rubber and ivory revenue were fed into the fire. Concession agreements showing the terms under which private companies had operated were destroyed. Correspondence between Leopold and his agents in the Congo was burned. Trade records, tax receipts, personnel files, military orders. The entire documentary record of a private colony that had operated for nearly a quarter of a century was systematically eliminated. Leopold supervised the destruction personally. He told his aides that the records were his personal property, just as the Congo itself had been his personal property, and that he had every right to destroy them. He said, "They have no right to know what I did there." The burning was not limited to Brussels. Leopold's agents in the Congo were also ordered to destroy local records. Station logs, trade manifests, military reports, personnel records, every piece of paper that documented how the system operated on the ground was targeted. Some officials complied immediately. Others hesitated, and their hesitation is the only reason any record survived at all. The few documents that escaped the furnaces, letters that had been copied to other government departments, reports that had been filed with the Belgian parliament before the destruction order was issued, records held by the concession companies in their own archives would become the foundation for every subsequent investigation into Leopold's Congo. Every book written about the Congo Free State is built on fragments that survived the burning. The full picture will never be known, because Leopold made sure of that. The burning was not secret. It was not done in haste. It was a deliberate, methodical destruction of evidence carried out over weeks by a man who understood that the financial records were more dangerous to him than any military threat. Because the records would have shown exactly how much money Leopold had extracted. They would have shown where it went. They would have shown which European investors had profited. They would have shown which banks had handled the transactions. They would have shown the true cost, in human lives and in stolen wealth, of the world's only private colony. Without the records, nobody could prove the numbers. And without the numbers, Leopold could negotiate the handover on his own terms. And negotiate he did, because the transfer of the Congo to Belgium was not an act of justice. It was Leopold's final and most profitable transaction. In 1908, the Belgian parliament voted to annex the Congo Free State as a Belgian colony. The international pressure had made it impossible for Leopold to continue operating the territory as private property. But Leopold did not hand it over as a defeated man. He handed it over as a negotiator. Leopold demanded, and received, a payment of 50 million Belgian francs as a gesture of gratitude for what he described as his great sacrifices for the Congo. He demanded, and received, an additional 30 million francs in construction bonds for projects he had already completed in Belgium using Congolese money. He demanded, and received, a guarantee that Belgium would assume all outstanding debts of the Congo Free State, debts that Leopold had accumulated by borrowing against the territory's future revenues. The man who had extracted a fortune from the Congo, who had burned the records so nobody could see how much, walked away from the handover with 80 million francs in cash and bonds. Belgium inherited the debts. Leopold kept the profits. Historians have described this as Leopold's grandest scheme. He pawned off a bankrupt and debt-ridden colony onto the Belgian taxpayer while keeping his personal fortune intact. The buildings he had built with Congolese money, the palaces, the parks, the greenhouses, the museum, were donated to the Belgian state. This was presented as generosity. It was evidence laundering. By donating the buildings, he ensured that nobody would question where the construction money had come from, because the buildings now belonged to Belgium. Leopold died on December 17, 1909, 1 year after the handover. He had never visited the Congo. He had never seen a rubber vine. He had never met a Congolese person. He had run the world's only private colony for 23 years from a palace in Brussels, extracting a fortune, building an empire of real estate and public works, and destroying the evidence before anyone could calculate the total. And the money did not only go into palaces and public parks. Leopold lavished vast sums on his personal life. He gave estates, villas on the French Riviera, Congolese bonds, and millions of francs to his mistress, a woman the Belgian press nicknamed La Reine du Congo, the Queen of the Congo. She reportedly spent 3 million francs on dresses at a single store in a single visit. The rubber profits the Congolese villagers had been forced to harvest under threat of violence were being spent on Parisian fashion by a woman who had never heard of the Congo. Leopold also hid wealth in foreign investments, art collections, and assets held in the names of trustees, structured deliberately to keep it outside Belgian jurisdiction where his legitimate heirs could not claim it and the Belgian parliament could not audit it. The man who had burned the archives of the Congo Free State had also hidden his personal fortune so thoroughly that it has never been fully traced. His great-great-great-granddaughter, Princess Stephanie, has publicly demanded access to Leopold's will, which has been sealed for over a century. She has been refused. She has asked publicly, what have they got to hide? The Belgian government has never answered the question. The Congo, now the Democratic Republic of the Congo, remains one of the poorest countries on earth despite sitting on some of the largest mineral deposits in the world. Cobalt, copper, diamonds, gold, coltan. 70% of the world's cobalt, essential for every lithium battery and every smartphone and electric vehicle, comes from the Congo. The mechanism has changed. The concession companies have new names. But the direction of the money has not. Foreign capital controls the resources. The Congolese people produce the wealth, and the profits leave the country, just as they did when Leopold owned it. In 1885, every major nation in Europe handed one man personal ownership of a territory 76 times the size of his own country. He told them it was a humanitarian mission. It was a private corporation. He extracted a fortune in ivory and rubber through a system of forced labor enforced by a private army. He took 50% of every profit. He monopolized all trade. He laundered the money through palaces, parks, and public buildings that he donated to the Belgian state, so that the evidence of where the money came from would be hidden inside the generosity of where it went. When investigators came looking, he burned the archives. When Belgium finally took the colony, he negotiated 80 million francs in cash and bonds and walked away with the profits while Belgium inherited the debts. He never visited the Congo. He never saw what his system did to its people. He ruled it for 23 years from a desk in Brussels. And when he died, Belgium called him the Builder King and put his statue in the public squares he had built with stolen money. The records are burned, the will is sealed, the statue still stands. And the money has never been traced. Every source is in the description. That is not a theory. That is what remains of a paper trail that one man tried to destroy. If this connected something you were never taught in any classroom, that is exactly what this channel exists to do. Every video on this channel follows the money through the primary source archive. Subscribe if you followed the paper trail. And if you made it this far, leave the word Leopold in the comments so I know who stayed for the full story.